Hello and welcome to Barbara's podcast. This is the show for women, all about health, nutrition, and wellness. It's the show that will empower you and inspire you to create a healthier lifestyle.
Hello and welcome. I'm Barbara Karafocus, and I'm excited to introduce Jaclyn Downs, who is a functional nutrigenomics consultant and has a passion for fertility optimization and reproductive wellness. She also holds a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology from Drexel University and a master's degree in holistic nutrition. In addition to having certifications as a health coach, yoga instructor, and doula, she also holds a certification in genetic nutrition with the Nutrigenetic Research Institute, where she's also a researcher. That is impressive. Welcome, Jaclyn.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
So, well, can you share with us your journey, how it began?
Sure. So I talk about the evolution of how I got to where I am today in my book. I have an academically published book called Enhancing Fertility Through Functional Medicine, using nutrigenomics to solve unexplained infertility. And my father was in the nutrition industry ever since I was in late elementary school. And he was very outside the box, very cutting edge as far as his nutrition research goes. So I had always known that there was more to nutrition than what we were being fed by the United States USDA and the food guidelines. And at the time it was the food pyramid. And so I wanted to major in nutrition, but there were no schools in my state that offered a nutrition program that I wanted that wasn't just completely bought and paid for by major corporations.
Yeah.
So I got a psychology degree instead. And when I was getting my psychology degree, I learned about something called psychoneuroimmunology. And that is all about how the immune system and our brain functioning and our hormones, like everything's just kind of all tied together. So it really put the science to the holistic person. So I after college, I just went on to become a health coach. I got my master's in holistic nutrition, and my previous career was in birth work, as you had said in the introduction, as a doula, and I had a doula collective, and we gave workshops, and I apprenticed with a home birth midwife, primarily for the Amish and Mennonite communities in Pennsylvania. And it was then in my early to mid 20s that I realized that fertility was pretty common, because people weren't talking about it, especially in my circles, being in my early 20s at the time. And I realized how much was not known about fertility challenges and repeat miscarriages. And so I sort of took my birth career and my nutrition career, and they dovetailed when I started doing research for a naturopath. He hired me to research MTHFR, which is the most commonly known genetic variant. And so that one gene turned into the whole methylation pathway, which turned into other pathways intersecting with other pathways and all the genes involved in them. And so I really got to see how these pathways worked and the nutrients they needed. And here I am today. So I work, about 50% of my clientele is relating to fertility challenges, but the other half is people of all sorts, people that are just, they want to know their genes, or they've been to 12, 13, 14 different doctors and they still can't figure stuff out. Men, women, children. And so I'm not just limited to fertility, but using your genetic blueprint and having a trained eye interpret your genetic blueprint can really, really help to move past roadblocks and give you a broader and more a broader 30,000 foot view, but also get more specific reasons as to why something could be happening or why a supplement had an adverse reaction for you. So long story, but here we are today.
I was very curious to hear your story because it goes through, psychology, it goes through, a holistic health coach and a doula, and, it's amazing story to hear.
Yeah, my mom was pretty frustrated there for a little bit. She's like, you're going from one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing, but like they all dovetailed perfectly to where I am today. So I'm really thankful for my long convoluted path, for sure.
Well, I think there is always a purpose. Whatever you learn, I believe is useful. It will come into use at some point in your life. So, well, I guess you have a passion for helping families achieve, perhaps a wanted pregnancy, if we could focus on that. Are there some common reproductive health issues you encounter, and how do you tailor your approach to addressing these issues?
Yes. So the bottom line of my book, which it really could be for anybody, somebody that read my book and gave it a review said, like, while it's written towards the fertility demographic, it's really looking at common but lesser known causes of inflammation and oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is damage to the cells that causes inflammation, and inflammation causes oxidative stress. So really, that oxidative stress and inflammation are at the heart of all chronic conditions. And so that is what I do, is I help people using their genes, using symptoms, using labs, using a comprehensive intake. I help you to find out the primary causes of oxidative stress. Is it that you're not making enough antioxidants? Is it that your detoxification pathways need some support? Have you been exposed to certain toxins? Are you predisposed to your body making more free radicals and therefore not having enough antioxidants? So that oxidative stress and inflammation, I would say, is the cornerstone for most of the fertility challenges that I'm seeing. Because when we have inflammation and oxidative stress that damages cells, our eggs and sperm are the first things to take a hit, because reproducing and making a baby is not essential for us to stay alive. And so the body sort of does the whole rob Peter to pay Paul thing. And so it says, well, obviously now's not a good time to make a baby. So let's just steal from reproductive capacity to make sure that we can get through this day.
And I guess it goes into survival mode.
Yes, 100%. And I talk about that as far as the fight or flight and the rest and digest, repair, reproduce, or also called feed and breed. There's the two states of your nervous system. And so if you're constantly in fight or flight, then our body thinks that we're running from a bear, right? Evolutionarily. And so the body's stress response doesn't respond any differently than it did 1,000 years ago. It still responds to stress, even though our stressors are different. Our response is still the same, and that is to, well, first off, we have stress, we're in danger, we're not going to bring a baby into the world. We need to make sure we have energy to run away from the predator rather than energy to grow a baby.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
Yes.
So in your practice, you assess various factors such as diet, toxin exposure, stress. How do you integrate these elements into a comprehensive health plan for your clients?
So it really starts with a comprehensive, meticulous intake form. I am asking all kinds of questions about your periods, your poop, your sleep, the water you're drinking, the exposures you've had, if you've lived knowingly in any house that had water damage or mold. I'm asking about your occupation. So I'm asking all of these things to really get a good idea as to what could be causing your imbalances or your symptoms. And then from there, we can use genetic and lab work to really kind of find where in the haystack that needle would be, like which area or areas. And so I do like functional lab testing. I often do a urine organic acids test. That's one of the most run tests in my practice. Also a mycotoxin test to test for mold in the body. So those kinds of tests can be really, really revealing as to what could be causing a lot of burden on the body and taxing the body.
Do you see with your clients, are there any common, like the top 3 most common causes that you find, whether it could be for infertility or for health in general? Have you seen any patterns coming up?
Yes. So I have different chapters on all of these common topics in my book. Each chapter is a different topic, but I would say the one thing that sort of affects everybody is sluggish detoxification. And that's why the foundational package for what I offer for genetic interpretation is the detoxification and antioxidant package, because if you're not detoxifying and you're not making enough antioxidants to fight the free radicals to keep your cells healthy, nothing else is going to be working downstream. So we live in a toxic soup of a planet. Our poor bodies were not designed to deal with the amount of toxin exposure we are getting bombarded with these days. And so our detox pathways are overwhelmed. And then some people are genetically predisposed to having even more of a difficult time detoxifying. And that's why, 4 people can live in the same home and one person is really, really sick from the mold that they have in their home and another person feels just fine, because everybody's genetics and biochemistry are different. So it creates different size buckets, so to speak, for people to for their tolerance. So I would say detoxification is very, very central to pretty much everybody. We can always optimize our detoxification pathways. Also, detoxification is really, really important. So it's good to know, it's good to test to see what toxins you have, but also to know what you have so that you're not passing that on to children. A lot of these toxins pass on to your baby in utero, and they absolutely pass through breast milk. So even if you're not having any fertility challenges, it's really good to know what toxins you're dealing with and get them out of your body, just so that you can have a baby that meets its full genetic potential. So again, detox is number 1. Histamine intolerance is another common one. Now, a lot of people think, well, I don't have allergies, I don't get hay fever, histamine's not an issue. But I talk about in my book, histamine has its fingers in so many pots in the body. It can affect your gastrointestinal system. It can affect your hormones, because histamine and estrogen feed each other. And so when I ask the right questions in your intake form and in our consult, I can get a better idea for if histamine is likely an issue for you. So detoxification and histamine, and also blood sugar. If you have wonky periods and you're getting hangry, or you're getting a mid-afternoon slump, which is so common, then you likely need to support your blood sugar a little bit more proactively. So I would say those are the top 3 things that I see.
If someone, or even if someone had to choose 1 or 2 tests.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that is really, really personalized, because everybody has had different exposures. Or, if somebody is on a very, I don't run stool tests too often, but if somebody is really having some gastrointestinal symptoms and they're on a very restricted diet, and then I might run a stool test. But usually, to start with, I really like the urine organic acids test. I don't know if you've ever talked about this, but this is
No, I haven't. It's a
urine test. It's the first morning's urine test, and it looks at metabolites in your body. So your urine is like your car's exhaust. So you could, for instance, go to the doctor and they could check your B12 because you're tired all the time, and they'll say, well, your B12 looks fine. Well, that's because it's in the blood. But how much has actually gotten into the cell for the body to use and then metabolize and get rid of? Okay. So I personally prefer urinary B12 measurement, which is nice cross-referenced with blood. But if you're eating meat and, or taking supplements, you probably are getting enough B12 in, but how much can actually get into the cells and do what it needs to do? So doing a urine organic acids test to measure these types of things, especially coupled with genetic testing for predisposition, because we can see what your B vitamin status likely is based on your genes. Because we have genes that help to make B12. We have genes that transport B12. We have genes that are involved with the absorption of B12. And so if you're really, really variated there, that could show you what type of B12 would be best for you and which form, as far as like sublingual or tablets, or if you need a little bit more help absorbing it. So the urine organic acids test and the genetic test would be my top two tests that are recommended in my practice, and also the practice where I subcontract out of. There's practitioners there, and those are the most common tests run as well. We can see so much. So basically a urine organic acids test is a snapshot of what is currently happening in your body. And then with the genetics, that's not a diagnosis, that's a predisposition, right? Because just because you have a genetic variant doesn't mean that it's expressing. But if you have symptoms and the labs show and your genetics show 3 arrows are pointing in the same direction, it's likely expressing, and then we can know how aggressively to address it.
Okay. I have another question for our listeners. The urine organic acids test.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a simple test? Can you get it in your ordinary lab, or is it more of a specialized test that you have to go to a specialized lab?
Well, it's ordered through a practitioner and it gets drop shipped to your house. It includes shipping an envelope back to the lab. So it's super easy. Once you order it, the whole process is really, really smooth. So okay. It's not a direct to consumer test though. So you usually, as far as I'm aware, you usually have to get it through a practitioner. I do think that Quest, maybe it was years ago, but it was not a test that they run regularly. So nobody was able to help me interpret it. This was like early days when I first heard about it, and I wanted to get it covered by insurance.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty useless. So it's typically not covered by insurance. I mean, at least here in the United States. But yeah, they're not hard to come by for sure. And a lot of different types of, you don't have to be a medical doctor to order it. You just have to be a certified or licensed practitioner.
Well, because in Cyprus, you go to your GP and you ask them that you want some blood tests done, and you go to a lab, and it's on the health system, a national health system. So I was just wondering whether if it was more of a specialized test, or if the local lab you could ask them for one. But it's something I'll have to research.
Yeah, you could, but then the interpretation is the tricky part. Same with the genetics. But I do know that I have had clients internationally before, and some of the labs do ship internationally. So it would really depend on which country you are in and where it's going to get shipped to.
Okay. Well, have you got any success stories to talk about that you'd like to share?
Yeah, there's tons. But again, each one is very specified because 5 people could have blood sugar issues, but they're all caused by different things, and so you want to support them in different ways. And so I talk about one in my book. Excuse me. There was a client that came to me, and her periods were all over the place, and she wanted to get pregnant again, and she kept having miscarriages. She had come to me and she had like 9 or 10 miscarriages already, and she was just really, really, really frustrated. Yeah. And so I did the foundational things as far as like, okay, so she was jogging a lot. That was her way to manage stress, but she was overdoing it. So we had her kind of shift her exercise regimen that's less taxing for her adrenals. Yeah. And I balanced her blood sugar, and we got her periods to be textbook, really uneventful, perfect, periods. And it wasn't until I saw her genetics, because the test can take up to 12 weeks. And so we had started working together, and then she decided she wanted to do the genetic testing. So we continued working while we were waiting to get the genetics back. And she didn't have any typical symptoms of histamine intolerance or histamine issues. but her genetics showed otherwise. And so it was more of a sneaky, insidious histamine issue. And so histamine, I have a chapter on histamine in my book, and it's really, really important. We need histamine in certain levels, but too much can cause a problem. And again, too little can cause a problem. And so she was, we helped support her histamine levels. She had excess histamine, and she was able to go on and conceive again and carry to term.
Oh, lovely story.
Yeah, so without the genetics, we never really would have known, because it's not like she had allergies or anything like that. That would be obvious.
So sometimes it's so important to dive in deeper.
100%. Yeah. So we do get a lot of people that, like I said, have been to multiple practitioners and have tried all the things. It would be great, especially when it comes to fertility, if people would come to me before. I even made an Instagram post about this, like, see me before resorting to assisted reproductive technologies, because there's a reason why the body has halted mating ability. And so just going to do IVF or IUI is just forcing hormones to be in specific ranges without addressing why the body has felt the need to pause it. And so this is also the reason why if there is a success with assisted reproductive technologies, which they have a very low success rate, but if there is a success, these children are statistically more likely to have some sort of learning disorder or disability or something like that, because the root of the problem was not addressed.
Which I'm sure it'll crop up again in the future in the body, even after the pregnancy, if the root cause is there and it hasn't been addressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very likely.
Yeah. Well, in closing, where can our listeners get in touch with you, or if they would like to buy your book? Or
it can all be found on my website. So there's the homepage at jaclyndowns.com, JACLYNDOWNS.com. I also have a resources page where you can book a consult with me. I do offer complimentary 15-minute discovery calls, just so that you can ask more questions. I can even share my screen with you to show you what the software looks like for the interpretation. And if you have previously done a genetic test with 23andMe, I am able to upload those as well, so it'll be a little less expensive. I would not recommend going and getting just any genetic test and interpretation, because a lot of those are very, very generic, or they're very limited. They're only looking at a handful of genes, and there's no trained practitioner interpreting what that means for you. So you can learn all about my process and my approach and the interpretation and genetic testing on jaclyndowns.com. And then you can also follow me on Instagram. My handle is Functional Fertility Solutions.
well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wealth of knowledge and insights. It was lovely to have you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Barbara's podcast. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter or e-courses. Celebrate life, and see you at the next episode.